Again, very excited to have you here today. We have Christophe Charrier, who is the CEO and founder of Glimpact, and also had the pleasure of working on the single market for green product. So a very well-versed in the world of the European Commission and EU policy, and very lucky to have him sharing his expertise here today. And then also we have JR, who is the CTO at Toyota. So he's our data expert. He's going to help talk about all things scope 3 and how to really address the challenge of data and creative ways of connecting information systems. And then we'll also have the short video from Daniel Aronson at ValueTools. He is an expert in double materiality and CSRD. So we'll get his perspective on sort of new state that double materiality is bringing into this conversation.
Historical. So what I will explain to you is what is important and what this new legislative framework will have so many impact in the United States. First of all, is this legislation, which name is CSRD, which is a legislation, we say a directive. So a directive for the European Union framework means that each member state of the European Union have to rewrite the legislation in their own country. Okay. So CSRD is related what we call the extra financial reporting. So if I want to summarize very quickly what means CSRD, it's mandatory extra financial reporting according to what exists today, which is a European Sustainability Reporting Standard, and ESRS is the way to implement the CSRD. So this is now entering force. It means that all companies with certain specificity, big company, you will see that after, have to make and to apply this directive regarding their activity in 2024. There is a very important disruptive approach, and especially when you see that from United States. It's a concept of double materiality. In United States, usually, when you speak about sustainability, you are in this part, which means the financial materiality. In fact, what is impact external in your company, and especially sustainability and climate impact on your company. But European Union want to add another part, which is very important, which is the company impact on people and the planet. So if you are familiar with scope 1, 2, and 3, globally speaking, here is your scope 1 and 2, and this is scope 3. So CSRD require a global vision of your activity, upstream and downstream. And you will see in this conference that this approach is not easy to evaluate a scope 3, which is the big deal on a lot of sustainability reporting. For this directive, European Union allow you to choose your methodology to make that. But what is important that most companies in Europe, that in the CSRD text, there was a line which said you could use a specific method, which then is an OEF, European Commission method, organization environmental footprint. Okay, and I will come back on that. And if you use this method, you are considered as compliant for all those impacts. So the key point of CSRD is how you characterize this impact. And this method that I will come back to is done to do so. And this method is not only European, like how we demonstrate this today, it's a universal method that can be applied in Europe or in the United States. So just a question of data, and we'll discuss this with Jean-Rémy. So here's the calendar which comes from the European Commission. I asked. So you have different stages. So first, all company, European one or US one, which have significant activity in the European Union, If there are more than 500 employees, for 40 million sales or 20 million results, okay, they have to start in 2025. They are reporting on the period of 2024. So it means that this specific company have to apply next year for their activity of 2024. After, there is another calendar for company with more than 250 employees for your entity, but for all non-euro entity, this company will have the right to do so 1 year after. And then, and this is important, so in most of law like this, sometimes SNA is not on the scope of the law, which is not the case here. The European Union wants all companies, small, big, or very big. So this will be between 2026 until 2029. So in globally speaking, the big company will have to start next year. So what is the purpose of ESPR? There is two methods here. First, the European Commission, product category per product category, will define eco-design requirements. Let me give you an example of what's mean eco-design requirement. You see my shirt. One eco-design requirement could be that all people who sell shirts like this must use a minimum percentage of raw material which come from which recycled fiber. It could be 30%, 40%. So this is an example. So it means that players in different industries have to respect this eco-design requirements. And the second concept is disclosure of environmental performance through a very disruptive concept, which then is digital product passport. All products who want to be distributed in European Union will have to follow these two rules. And the consequences, if you don't do that, you will not have an access to European Union markets. So to give you an idea, this law will be applied to certain product category. So this is the first one, which will be on which will be applied ESPR. All those will be concerned by this legislation. To give you an idea of what means the digital passport, you have an illustration of that. So it's, in fact, the digital passport will give to the consumer all information he needs for, first of all, the demonstration of the respect of the eco-design requirement, and then important idea of what is the environmental footprint of the product. So here is these two common disruptive components of this two legislation, which is in fact aims to go to the same objective as I just mentioned, the concept of double materiality and the systemization of the environment. You will see that the methodological framework is not only carbon, it's affirm the fact that carbon footprint is important, of course, but not enough. And I will explain to you why. So let's come back to the second revolution, which is this common methodology framework. So for both legislation, CSRD and ESPR, European Union have created a specific method. And I want to share with you the fact that this method is not done in just by European Union to protect its market, not at all. And I can tell you that because I was there before to create Glimpact. I was the wonderful opportunity to work in the steering committee of the European Commission to make this. So 10 years of work, and the European Council of the European Union asked the European Commission to answer to these two questions. What is environmental footprint? What it means? And second, how do we measure it? it's an easy question. But if you see the global answer in the world, everybody has different answer towards this question. In the United States, in Europe, everywhere. And the question is carbon is enough or not? So Human Commission creates a working group, science 10 years, scientists, professional organization, official representative of each member state of the European Union, and external. United States was represented. I was there. Japan was represented. China, all to be part of this discussion. And the result of this very important work is a method which is two levels. PEF and OEF method. PEF means product oriented footprint. OEF means organizational oriented footprint, which allow you to measure not only the carbon footprint, but the global components of the environmental species, which means 16 impact categories, which could be measured with this method. And the good news that this method, if you use it, you are considered compliant for CSRD and ESPR. So what is the specificity of this methodology framework? I can say everything on this slide. First, the definition of environmental footprint of the European Union is not one impact, is 16 impacts of the activity of the human activity in the planet. Of course, there is climate change, which is CO2 emission, but there is land use, water scarcity, ozone depletion, use of fossil resources, but also mineral resources, ecotoxicity, which means pollution on the river, on the sea, and the atmosphere. And all those 16 impact categories can allow you to reconstitute what we call the 9 planetary boundaries. The other concept of this method is you have to measure this impact all around the life cycle stage of the product. You have to know that one big problem we have in the world, including for CO2 emission, most of the companies don't use the same characterization method. So the best method gives you a specific characterization method for each impact. I will tell you an example. Usually, everybody says that I report my CO2 emission according to CSRD protocol. It's not enough. Because if you take the CSRD protocol, you can have as many interpretations than company who use it. With the PEF method, you can't make something different. So in other words, two people who implement the PEF method will have the same result, which is very important. If I summarize, it's the same concept, but PEF for product, OEF for organization, and you will see that in these two approaches, you can answer to the requirement in terms of eco-conception, as I mentioned, but also in terms of extra-financial reporting. And more than that, you will discover that using this approach, you will have a very detailed modelization of Scope 3, which is a big problem for a company. The conclusion of all this is that you will discover that, in fact, these two legislations, and especially this common methodological framework, PEF and OEF method, this systemic approach of the definition of environmental footprint change radically the vision you can have of the state of the ecological transition. If you have a strategy which only focuses on carbon footprint, you can have, and it is in most of the cases you see that you can have a wonderful strategy and you can demonstrate that you reduce your carbon footprint, but you don't do that at the same time you use 2 or twice times water, land use, and so on and so on. The CSRD is an opportunity for company to have a right framework in order to first see the reality of their impact, and more than that, to have the foundation of the action plan to reduce, to implement strategic business plan in terms of reduction of global environmental footprint of a company. And it's also a good framework to implement science-based target initiative.
I also would like to add one thing to that, talking about the methodology used for CSRD. In CSRD, it does define, I think you touched on this, but I just want to make sure it's clear, that you can use your what methodology you would like to, but you have to go ahead and then prove that the methodology is viable and meets a certain level of accreditation and validity. Whereas if you use the PEF OEF methodology, it is already accredited in the eyes of the European Commission, and those will be reviewing the CSRD reporting as well.
I mentioned here because I think it's a very important question. Like, there's a lot of companies in the US that have targets. They have SBTi targets, as you mentioned. They are in line with 1.5 degrees, some are in line with 2 degrees and so on. One of the key issues is that most of those companies, they don't really have a pathway to get there, right? So everyone right now this week is discussing, is this realistic? Is 1.5 still achievable? Like, those are topics that are out there, right? One of the reasons is that companies have made commitments with no action plan of how to get there. This gives you an action plan. And this, yes, like, is more complex and it's more criteria than just climate change, but at least doing a life cycle analysis, going down to the product level, allows you to understand what you can do on your core products and and you can then understand at the product level, if I implement this action, and this action, I'm going to reduce my total environmental impact by 30%. And by the way, by doing that, we calculate how much you're going to reduce your climate change. Because if you do the PEF, you also by default have your climate change reduction. So you can know, am I going to be on track for 1.5 degrees or not? You're still doing one at a time. You're just doing everything at the same time. And honestly, in a more efficient way at a lower cost.
No, and this is where it starts to come up, the data conversation, in that you can see these forms is just basic activity data. So the amount of material, what kind of material, these sorts of questions. But knowing that we have 16 impact categories, it's not 16 times the amount of data. It's the same activity data that can be traced back to the specific categories. So the problem of data is as complex as it always has been for carbon reporting. Now we just, with the results, can have a more comprehensive vision. And in this case, we're really just getting into the idea of knowledge is power, and that because when people are setting these targets and they don't even know what their impact is, how can they even know what their leverage is for reduction? So this is an example of a shirt that we have modeled in our platform and evaluated according to the PEF method. So what you can see here is the total score in PEF points. This is per day of wear, which is a functional unit, which accounts for the durability and the useful life of the product. But looking at entity, so this is just the product as the whole, we see 1,110 micro points. And so this is an aggregated score of all 16 impact categories that are normalized and weighted to give us this essentially environmental price that can be compared across industries, across product categories. We can genuinely compare apples to oranges with a score like this, and even across different companies. You can understand how your products compare to other companies with the PEF method, because the characterization method cannot be changed by whoever's implementing the method. So looking dynamically at how the impact of a product spans across all of these different categories, we can see here that climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, is 21%. So the most sizable chunk of impact of this product. But we understand that with all these other things, water use, particulate matter, we understand that these are important things, having urban smog and water scarcity and land use. These are already conversations we're having. Even in Climate Week, when we say it's Climate Week, we still talk about water, we still talk about land, we talk about human health, all of these different things. And so this method just puts them all into the vision at the same time. So you can really understand the true extent of impact and ensuring that that impact isn't transferred. So then we can also see how this impact is broken down across the different life cycle stages. So again, here we see raw materials as 45 approximately % of the overall impacts of this product, and that's just the raw material production. And so looking at something like packaging, that's 1.29%. In terms of the actual potential to reduce the impact of your scope 3 or of your products, or just reduce impact in general, you're not exactly getting the best bang for your buck if you're working on this 2%. So being able to understand how the impact is distributed across the life cycle is that power to leverage valuable reduction actions. So we can look at this in a slightly different way. Just before I pass it off, looking to the organization level. So as we've said, we can do sort of top down or bottom up, where you're either slowly working to detail your scope 3, or you have all of your products, all of the life cycle assessments of everything you've done, and you're aggregating it to rebuild your scope 3. So this is the Sankey diagram, as we've seen before, of just this one product, where on the left we have 100%, and we're still moving as 100%, but we can see how it's broken down based on the different life cycle stages. And so you can see at the bottom, it just helps illustrate, packaging at that 1.29%, raw material up here at about 45%. And we can navigate dynamically into these areas to say, okay, manufacturing is a problem. If we go into manufacturing, we can start to see, okay, where is the problem within manufacturing? We can see weaving as 18.7% of the total impact, and then spinning, and then dyeing, and then some transportation involved within that manufacturing route. This gives us the power with this global vision to be able to actually understand where we should be focusing our time and energy. And the same thing goes for raw materials. Once you've identified that this is almost half of the impact of the product, we know that that's where we need to be focusing our energy and our resources, is the raw material, whether it's the material, where it's from, who's making it. All of these things end up being important factors, and you can dive deeper and deeper into the materials and where your hotspots are. And in a situation like this, once you are able to see your holistic vision, you're not going to waste time doing something and not being able to actually achieve significant reduction.
To build up what Mila was saying, so with this Sankey diagram and with OEF analysis, really is you can start to understand your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. This Sankey diagram, which is a visual representation of environmental impact, the larger the area, the more the environmental impact. And as we go from left to right, it gets more and more specific. This is the example of a retailer, but this is what it'll typically look like. Scope 1 and scope 2 are rather small, and scope 3 is this large undefined portion. So defining all of the 16 impact categories according to the SBTI definitions of scope 1, 2, and 3.
All your suppliers,
Mhm.
you already tortured them with
Yeah.
emissions data, et cetera. Now it's like, hey, we forgot 15 other categories.
So-
Like, we need water, we need waste, we need this, polluters, whatever.
So that is a good point, and I do want to underscore with PEF OEF analysis, the data required for the analysis is actually very similar to the data required for a greenhouse gas protocol life cycle analysis. It is very similar because what the PEF OEF analysis does is it looks at the inputs and outputs, and from those inputs and outputs defines the 16 impact categories. So inputs could be, kilowatt hours of coal, of electricity from a coal power plant, or water consumption. So it is essentially the same amount of data that is required for a carbon footprint, carbon emissions life cycle assessment. It just takes the information and uses it to define more than just a carbon footprint impact. It uses it to define the resource use impact and the other 15 impact categories. So that's what's going on there. With the OEF analysis, the real advantage here is that at the end of this approach, the scope 3, which this is the example of a retailer that sells textile, apparel and footwear, and then also has grocery products, so food products. Scope 3 is going to be 95% of their environmental impact, but with the OEF approach, you could see what makes up that 95%. It gives you that level of disaggregation, so you know that, okay, 58 is coming from the textile sector, and specifically the raw materials and the manufacturing processes. So that is the advantage that OEF gives you, is that once you have the completed analysis, you can see very clearly what is contributing to your Scope 3 impact. But one important part is that this is the results of the OEF assessment. In order to get the results of the OEF assessment, you need the data of your suppliers, you need the data of your value chain. That is underscoring all of this, is that we need the information and we need the data in order to perform that assessment. It's something that's very integral to this. So
yes, it's a very, and it's time to give the floor to Jean-Rémy. Knowing the fact that regarding data, the methodology gives you the direction of which data to collect. Because with the method, you will not collect all of them. You will collect the one which is important. And for the other one, your methodology that created and uses secondary data sets you can use to replace what. So it's important to focus on the specific information which is relevant on the global result. No need to select all the information for transport if it takes only 5%. Better to focus your traceability approach to those information, which is very important.
So getting the data into the platform, and whichever platform you use is going to be a challenge, as you mentioned. There are ways around this, but at the end of the day, your data is going to come from three big sort of categories. Number one is your IT ecosystem, your ERP tools, your PLM tools, where you have the data about the products you develop, any other IT tools. And the further along you are in that journey of gathering data and like having healthy data management at your company, it's going to take you easier to your end goal. Number two is your suppliers, IT ecosystem. Say the exact same thing, except a lot of your data actually doesn't. A lot of the data that is relevant to your impact actually doesn't belong to you, so you have to go find it somewhere. And then there's the data that's in the wild, like or in the fields. Fields are not the wilderness, actually. That's the idea, like the picture you gave of like Lacoste going to the cotton fields and like taking a picture. And they're gathering data points that maybe you don't have anywhere stored in any data ID system. So there's three main ways to get the data into your environmental impact platform. First is like API calls, like more and more things have APIs. So you just send data to an API and mix it into the system. Number two, like traditionally, like sending Excel files, have an auditor or someone on the field filling out, crunching numbers and sending the data, putting it into the system. And last one, like sort of questionnaires, like data traceability. I really focus on the API side of things. It's a big challenge. But then what do you get once you get there? You get the opportunity to get a feedback loop, because we talked a lot about reporting, like audits, like being compliant with the regulation and not paying fines or being able to sell your product. But the actual value that these platforms give you, like Glimpact, is a number and ways to make that number change. So it's really key to think of, I'm not just sending data into some platform and then sending a report to, I don't know, a governmental agency. I want to get a feedback loop and do something. So you actually get new data out of the platform that will help you do your work better. So if you can move to the next slide. A key thing to think is, I'm taking the example of the apparel industry or footwear industry, but this applies to any industry that creates products. In the life cycle of a product, you probably define a product line where you're going to say, okay, I want a collection. In my collection, I want a lot of linen this year. Then you have designers that will actually design products. Then you have product developers who actually say, this design you came up with, this is how we're going to manufacture it. And you're going to look at the physical sample. At some point, you're going to send that final product to a consumer somewhere in the world. The later on you measure your impact, the least relevant it is. It's like once someone has bought it, there's not much you can do about the environmental impact of your product. the earlier on you look at that environmental impact, the stronger your decision is going to be. If instead of saying we'll have a lot of silk in fall 2025, you said actually we're not going to have any silk in fall 2025, you can see that impact with a platform like Glimpact. You can easily say, oh, what if we replace all the silk with this other material in our collection? And this minimizes the amount of rework, because if you set this at the physical sample stage, you suddenly have to go back and redesign your whole collection with this new material. If at the get-go your collection is designed to be more sustainable, then it's just much easier to lower the overall impact of your company. So I'll give you a very, on the next slide and last slide, this is a very rough example of what this could look like. I'm a designer. This is a tool that's used very widely in the apparel industry, where designers create garments virtually in 3D, and so they literally manipulate what the fabric that's going to be assembled into here a dress. And this system can be connected to libraries of materials that can be real materials. They can be completely virtual. They can be real materials. You can have the data about the environmental impact of a yard of that material when you use it from a certain provider. And today, designers make decisions purely based, like they're design-driven design decisions. I'm going to use this fabric instead of that one because it looks better. But tomorrow, they can have environmental impact-driven design decisions. Because by making a simple API call to Glimpact or any other environmental platform, you can say, I'm going to switch from this material to that one, and Glimpact can compute the new score of that garment made with the sleeves in this material instead of that one, and so on. So the idea is any company that makes a product today uses dozens of different design systems, tools to design products. And all these tools are completely disconnected today, but they all have the ability, like the extensibility, to add simple modules. Like here, it would be like a Glimpact plugin for this platform would allow you very simply, every time a designer makes a change, to show the designer what's the impact of that change on the whole path of that product, but also the whole organization.
I hope that we have convinced you that this is complex, of course. And I understand companies say, oh, the European Union will ask us so many questions, this is difficult. But I really want again to insist on the fact that it gives you opportunity to really make relevant a commitment in terms of sustainability and prove that you not only declare or claim that you will change the world and reduce of 50 or 60% your environmental footprint, you say exactly what is your trajectory and how you will reach the objective of engagement. This is the most important things that we see in our customer. Okay, so all this means new opportunity, and especially for US businesses. We are all the time very impressed by your capability to deploy at large scale, something that in Europe we take more time than you. So the framework is here, the methodological is here, and it's not a European methodological, it's a universal approach, which can be implemented everywhere.